Okay, good evening and welcome to the Wood Centre for this year's first event in the Exit Right series for 2023. So I don't know, for those of you that came last year, the focus really was on kind of expert-led sessions, giving particular specific advice, but I think the organisers thought this year it would be interesting to get the take from people who have actually been along this journey to exit, from startup to exit. So they've worked very hard and they've lined up a really good selection of speakers for the next 4 events. A bit about myself. So I'm Robert Lind. I'm clearly the only person in the room with a suit, so I must be a lawyer of some description. I'm actually a patent attorney with Marks & Clark, and we're really pleased to be involved in this event this year. Startups and spin-outs really are the lifeblood of our work, so anything we can do to contribute, especially locally, to the really exciting community around Oxford is great. So I head the startup team in Marks & Clark, which is particularly focused on startups and bringing together not just technical expertise, but expertise along a whole kind of range of issues that are really unique and specialist to startups. And we have a great team across the UK and actually internationally that have a lot of knowledge in startups, which is why we're kind of hoping to be involved in this, not just this year, but in the future too. That's all about the start tonight. I'm going to introduce the speakers in a second, but I think first of all, Wendy Tinsley, who is Innovation Director of Oxford Innovation Space, is going to say a few words as well.
Thanks, Wendy. Robert. Thank you. Only very quickly from me. So I'm here to represent the 3 organisations that are heavily involved in the Wood Centre here. And the 3 organisations, tell you a little bit more about them. The 3 organisations that have put this event on are the Oxford Trust. And the Oxford Trust is a charity that owns this magnificent building, along with another building in the centre of Oxford, 2 innovation centres. And their purpose is the pursuit of science in innovation and education. The other company that's helping us here is Barclays Eagle Labs. We've got Matt here from Barclays Eagle Labs. I'm told there are now 38 Eagle Labs nationally. They provide an amazing amount of support in their co-working centres. And I have to say, we've got the best here, for sure. And I personally represent Oxford Innovation Space, which provides flexible workspace for entrepreneurs and innovators, and we create dynamic communities. We've got 28 centres nationally at the moment, 8 of which are in Oxford, and it's those 8 centres that are sort of contributing to this tonight. Fantastic. Okay, back to you, Robert.
Thank you, Wendy. Sorry, 2 housekeeping points. If there's a fire alarm, follow me out that door. I'll be first. And could you please make sure your mobile phones are switched off, particularly as being streamed live online at the moment. So as I said, we've got some great speakers lined up for this, some really interesting speakers, and I think you're going to learn some really interesting and exciting things from them. And tonight we've got David Llewellyn and Megan Ingham, who are with us from DJS Antibodies, based in the Wood Centre. And I think I'm not going to tell you anything about their story because that's what they're going to talk about. So basically, over to you guys, and we're really excited to learn what you've got to say.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming out. The thing I'm most excited about, actually, because I've been lucky enough to talk about this a couple of times, is actually hearing Megan's point of view. So Megan works with us and was our first employee, and so can actually tell you all the real dirt on what it was like being part of a team that went through this. But I thought maybe what would be interesting is starting with how we started the company, how it kind of grew, and then ultimately got to the stage where it was sold to a pharma company. So in that vein, it all, at least for me, started back back in 2010. I came to the UK to study, do a PhD at the university here in Oxford, and on the same day I kind of entered the lab there, this other young British bloke started his PhD at the same time, and basically every single day since then we have worked together. And so I don't know if that says that was a great match, or just bad ability to break up. But so Joe Illingworth and I started there, and did academic work. We were working on vaccines, and after PhD and then a sort of short stint doing a postdoc, we kind of having those discussions about what would come next. I think probably for both of us, we were thinking a bit, academia is interesting. I know Joe was looking at jobs on the west coast of the US in academic institutions. I was thinking, do I stay in the UK or go somewhere else? But throughout sort of the time studying and working together, we'd always said it'd be kind of fun one day to start a company. Never had a good idea on which we could start a company or any idea on how you would actually do that. But this kind of concept of doing that seemed kind of interesting and fun. And so fast forward a few years to this time where we were thinking, okay, well, yeah, what's going to come next? Right at about that time, this email popped into one of our inboxes saying sort of one start biotech business plan competition, £100,000 first prize. And we thought, that's pretty awesome. But mainly thought, hey, maybe we could enter this thing and learn a bit about what biotech is and what it means to kind of start a company. And so we put together this application, which was a one-page business plan, kind of painstaked over it for months and months, checked every comma and colon and spelling mistake, eventually put it in with like a minute to go, promptly to be rejected by the online portal saying that we hadn't put a company name in the box. And so that was the first moment we're like, oh crap, what do we do here? Myself, Joe, and this guy called Simon was sitting in the room, so we sort of said DJS. We're going to make antibodies, DJS antibodies. So that was the company name, and we've sort of stuck with that ever since. And been asked quite often, what's the story behind that name? And have always wished we had a more elegant kind of description for how we got there, but we've grown, pretty fond of that name and stuck with it. So we entered this competition. The other thing that happened at the time, we sort of realized, if we're going to go into this competition, we should at least kind of pretend to know something. And so this guy was giving a talk at the WIM over at the John Radcliffe Hospital from F-Star. He was the CEO of F-Star, which is an antibody company based in Cambridge. And he gave this talk that was, Joe and I went along to. It was super interesting biology, but after it, we like bounded up to him and collared him and was sort of said, hey, can we spend a month's worth of our student wages buying you a coffee just to ask you what biotech is about? And he very graciously sat down and talked to us about how he'd got into it and whatever. And then later he became a mentor to the company, eventually joined the board, and was actually instrumental in the deal that happened at the end. So it was this sort of really nice thread right from before we were even thinking about what the company could be right to the end, and sort of showing how those completely accidental connections were helpful. So anyway, sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but we ended this competition and got through to the sort of final stages, which meant we could go to a sort of 2 or 3 day like boot campy type thing where they put on lectures and taught people about how to raise finance and how to structure companies and what legal things you need to think about, which was again really great, mainly because we learned a bit of stuff that we didn't know anything about, but we met a bunch of other people doing similar things and met a bunch of mentors and got mentorship through that. And through that process developed out a broader business plan, got right through to the final stage, this big fancy kind of dinner and things, everyone black tied up, and the winner of the competition was not DJS. But it was really cool, and what happened after that is we all went to the pub to celebrate the guys who suddenly had £100,000 in their pocket. And if anyone here has met Joe, you'll know, and if not, you should, because he's a pretty chatty kind of guy. He sort of just walked up to the bar, grabbed a beer, and there was a guy standing by himself at the bar. So started chatting to this guy, and sort of 2 hours later, I looked over my shoulder, and Joe's still chewing the ear off this guy. And what we didn't know at the time, but a couple of weeks later, we found out was he was the head of innovation at Johnson & Johnson Innovation, and he kind of called us up and said, hey, it's great to meet you at the pub a couple of weeks ago. Really like the stuff that you're doing. We'd be interested to give you a bit of seed money to test out what at the time was just an idea. There's no data at all behind it. And the idea was that we thought we could make antibody, we could manipulate immunology in a certain way to make antibodies to receptors on the surface of cells. And these receptors are super well-known drug targets. About a third of all drugs out there that you can get target this kind of protein. But at that time, none of them were antibodies. They were all small molecules, pieces of chemistry. And so we thought, hey, we've got an idea of how we can make antibodies to these kinds of targets, something no one's ever done. And so, through luck or poor judgment, this guy at J&J said, hey, that's worth a punt. Let's give you guys £75,000 to do a set of experiments and test out this idea. And as those of us in the sort of bioscience, life sciences space know, 75 grand to us at the time was like more money than we could ever dream of, but is not very much when you start doing experimental work. So we got this. This is sort of the early 2015. We spent the first sort of half of 2015 working mainly out of my bedroom, which didn't even have a bed in it. It was in a share house, student share house, with a little table in the middle that we'd sort of get together with a piece of paper and draw out experimental designs. And we were sort of finally happy, okay, this is what we can do. We'd had a couple of suppliers kind of lined up to buy pipette tips and things off. We rented a bench in one of Oxford Innovation Centres up in Upper Heyford, which is about 20 or 30 minutes north of here. And the only real thing that's happened in Upper Heyford is there's a big old Air Force base that they used to bus students from Oxford up there to chain themselves to the fences to kind of demonstrate against nuclear proliferation. And since then, or since the sort of mid-90s when the base was all decommissioned, it's kind of now this odd place where they film Fast and the Furious 7 and not a lot else, except for one building where there's some offices and some labs. And the great thing that they had was they had bench space in a fully equipped lab that we could go and just rent. So we had 75 grand. We didn't have enough money to pay ourselves salaries, let alone buy a centrifuge or a laminar flow hood or any of these things. So it was really the only place we could do what we needed to do. And at that time, it was pretty much the only place in the UK that had a setup like that. And so it was just extremely lucky that it happened to be only half an hour from where we were living. So we moved in there, we set up these experiments, which was basically choose 10 of these receptors, use this kind of idea for a technology to try and make antibodies against all 10 of them. And they were chosen because we thought they were medically interesting, but also because they had different protein properties that meant it was going to be a real test for the platform to be able to perform against all 10. So we did that. We had rented this one bench. We didn't have enough money to rent two, which meant only one of us could be in the building at a time. So we worked shift work for about a year from mid-2015 to 2016. And we've got some sort of nice photos from that time of like someone ending a 3 a.m. shift and walking out to find their car 2 feet under snow, and thus kind of being stuck there in the middle of nowhere for the night, and then the next morning pretending that they hadn't been sleeping at the central night, at least to the centre staff. We weren't supposed to be doing that kind of stuff. But so we did this, we spent a lot of time doing it, and at the end of it all found out actually, hey, we've managed to make antibodies against all 10 of these different targets. And that was really kind of unprecedented. There'd been some kind of sporadic success here and there, but no one had ever managed to make antibodies against all of those. And so suddenly, it was probably, to be honest, the first time we thought, oh, you know what, this could almost work. This could actually do something. And we were down to sort of sub £5,000 in the bank account. And so it was really time to go and raise some money. And then again, sort of, a piece of location luck, I guess, was right about that time, sort of mid to end 2016, OSI, who's now our OSE here, the venture fund based in Oxford, was just starting and making its first investments. And so probably at a time where no other VC would have touched us with a barge pole, because to be honest, we had a pretty flimsy data package to say we could do this. OSE took that bet, invested about 700,000 in the company. And there the premise was like, okay, out of your 10, choose 2 or 3 targets and try and genuinely make like early drugs against them. So start the proper discovery, start identifying hits, start optimizing the hits, and let's see where we go. So that was the kind of the brief. We chose a couple of those targets. They're still the targets that have remained in the pipeline for the company since, and were the main kind of subject of the deal right at the end, and got cracking. Sort of late 2017, we had our first employee join us, which was Megan, and we'll hear from her soon. So that again was a super exciting time. Suddenly it wasn't just Joe and I bickering. We had someone to listen to us bickering and actually do a huge amount of the work. We got an Innovate UK grant, which helped kind of with the whole funding thing. We could actually do a little bit more stuff, which was really important. It's probably worth saying we failed to get a lot more Innovate UK grants. We spent a lot of time writing grant applications and getting very nice rejections. But sort of towards the end of 2017, we were doing all of this. And I think, it sounds like, oh yeah, this was all working well and going to plan. But the truth is there were through this, there were lots of ups and downs. And one of those times that I think is a particularly good example of that is we had 3 people, we had a couple of benches in this shared lab. So we obviously didn't have the resources to do massive drug discovery. So we were relying heavily on contract research organizations to outsource certain bits and pieces. And so one of those was we had a target, we wanted to make 1,000 antibodies against this target, find the ones that gave functional activity, and then take that subset and kind of optimize them. And so we'd done that. It had been a big chunk of the money that we had doing this project, taken months and months and months to do. And we got all this great data, got them all shipped back, and found through a long process, eventually found out that effectively what had happened is all the vials in the boxes that we got back were mixed up and mislabeled. And so someone had wiped out all the labels on the tubes and then written irrelevant labels on them. And so we had months and huge, at that time for us, huge amounts of money spent on this, all this data to say, hey, here are the not very many, but few hits out of these hundreds and hundreds of boxes of things, and no way of figuring out which ones were which. And so that was a pretty dark time, and we were like, this is going to sink us. We don't have the money to redo this again. We don't have the capacity to dig into those things and find them. And so through a bit of work we did here, a bit of like trying to cobble things together, a lot of cross-referencing, there was this moment where sort of Megan turns a screen around as like, this is an antibody and it's functional and it binds. Here you go. And that is the antibody that is now soon to go into the clinic and was the central core of the deal that was done. So we sort of thought we were swimming along merrily. It all came crashing down, and really one antibody out of all of these was found, and that then kind of reopened the opportunity that we weren't all going to crash and burn it in that moment. So yeah, in hindsight, we probably should have been more worried then, but we were so focused on just trying to salvage what was going on. So anyway, this all happens. We eventually build that up and optimize it. The antibodies show that this antibody is doing everything we wanted to do. It's modulating function in fibrotic cells, which is kind of the biology we were trying to hit. And then again, like all small companies, came time to raise more cash. So at that stage, we went out for a pre-Series A, we called it, which was a £6 million round. And effectively, again, the goal for that was take this antibody, that was an antibody to LPAR1, which is one of these receptors that's involved in especially fibrotic lung disease, but lots of fibrotic diseases. Take that and get it to the candidate nomination stage. So we have the candidate that's then going to go into the clinic. This is the antibody. So that's what we were aiming to do. In parallel, we also had another really interesting program, again, an antibody to these receptors going on sort of at an earlier stage, and we had still the fundamental discovery technology that we were hoping to use to do this over and over again. So that was the kind of the pitch for this £6 million. I've still got a spreadsheet that has 200 investors on it that we went and spoke to and pitched to, and ultimately 4 investors came together and invested in that round. So that was 196 no's to 4 yeses, which I still, I'm like, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good rate. But anyway, so it was that was a lot of kissing frogs, but. LifeArc, Sedgwick Yard, OSE came in and followed their money, and Amgen Ventures really came together to pull that together. And that was December 2020, we closed that. And so at that stage, we were still just 4 people, Joe, myself, Megan, and one other person had joined the company. And it was really then over 2021 and right at the beginning of 2022 that we grew from 4 to 12, which was kind of the state that we ended in. And so one thing at that point, after we'd raised that money, I think something that now I'm really proud that we did was we created this option pool for employees to get options that was actually pretty strange, and there were a lot of conversations with investors about that. So it's obviously pretty typical for employees, especially senior employees, to get options. But what we did was create this totally new share class, so different to the other shares in the company, that was protected from dilution. So no matter how much investment we got in the future, this was protected from dilution, and it was all shared amongst the employees and the non kind of executive employees. And at the time we built these models of like, if we grow to 50 or 100 people in the next 8 to 10 years and take on, this is what that will kind of look at. So this was all, we weren't thinking, hey, it's an exit's just around the corner. But I think what was really important is that, especially as a small team like that, it was so obvious that no matter what people's roles were, from, the newest member of the team to the person who'd been around the longest, any success was going to be dependent on everyone doing their part of the machine equally. And so it was really important that everyone, if the company was a success, everyone shared in that. And, when the whole deal went through, still probably the best thing I've ever done in my life was having those conversations with the team, being like, hey, your options are now actually worth something really meaningful. So that was really special and really great. So we did this, we got through, we nominated our candidate against this antibody, and then actually pretty soon, so that's end of 2020, and then kind of by mid to Q3 2021, we were thinking, hey, we need to do this again, we need to raise money again. The lead program was kind of ready to start going into manufacturing and tox and all these things which cost big money. So started going out again, speaking to investors, trying to raise £40 million. So that was what we wanted to do. We were going to get this lead asset, LPAR1, into the clinic, do a phase 1 study, and we were going to have a pipeline of other things coming up behind that. And one of the conversations we had was with an investor who was a corporate VC who said, yeah, look, we really love this stuff, but we're going to need, for us to invest, we need our R&D organization in the pharma company to buy in. So go and have a chat with the R&D team. So we did that, and this R&D team said, look, we really like this, but instead of taking a venture equity investment, would you be interested in some kind of partnering or licensing deal? And, we sort of thought, oh yeah, that's kind of what every biotech company dreams of. But hadn't expected, because remembering we're still a preclinical, pre-manufactured asset is our lead asset. So we're still a very kind of early stage company in the scheme of things. But, this offer kind of came out, and we'd sort of heard, if that happens, you probably shouldn't sell it to the first person that knocks on the door, and you should ask around a bit. So started that kind of process and reached out to, the who's who of pharma, a number of different companies, and said, look, we've got this asset here. It's a potential drug in the fibrotic disease space. It's an antibody. We've had some interest in it. Are you guys interested? And I don't know if it was to our surprise or not, but there was a lot of interest around that. And very quickly, we had a number of different companies in a data room looking at all the stuff we had. Suddenly, there were a bunch of term sheets on the table for a licensing deal around this program. And initially, that's what it was. And a licensing deal is a pretty standard pharma thing, upfront payment, milestone at, phase 1, 2, royalties, that kind of structure deal. DJS would remain as a company and have this partnership with a pharma company. And we spent a long time negotiating that and getting that to basically ready to go and sign. And for various reasons that still occasionally keep me up at night, that didn't happen. And at the sort of 11th hour, the structure of that changed totally. And it then changed to a deal that was effectively splitting the company in half and sort of demerging the LPAR1 asset and selling that, and then creating another company that had the other pipeline programs and the platform in it that we would continue to go on and operate. And that at the time was solving some problems and sounded like a good idea. But it then, what happened after that is probably, 6 or so months of time that we'll never get back in our lives of working really, really hard to try and make this happen. But there actually just being lots of issues. There were issues around how things would be treated from a tax point of view, legal stuff that was very difficult to unpick. That the team spent several weeks going through every single email we'd ever written in the history of the company and every single document we'd ever produced, which was about 1 million emails and about 240,000, well, exactly 241,602 documents, and redacting them so that we had one copy that had all the LPAR1 information and no other information, and another copy that had no LPAR1 information and all the pipeline information, so that we could sell the LPAR1 stuff and the buyer had all the info they needed, and we could keep all the platform stuff and continue on. And in particular, what was hard for us is our technology for how we discover antibodies was trade secret. So it wasn't patented, but it was know-how. And so we were really paranoid about not letting it kind of accidentally go into this vehicle that we were going to sell for the asset. So that took a long time, had huge complications, and we made a lot of progress over probably 6 months of doing that. But in the end, got to a point where we were just like, look, this is probably going to kill us all before we get across the finish line. We're just going to sell the whole company as a thing. Whoever gives us the most attractive proposal is going to get it. We're then going to put the agreements together in 30 days, sign them, close it. It's going to be done. And so at that point, we went, we had 2 parties that we went back to with that proposition. They both came in, and AbbVie put together the most attractive proposal. And then it kind of worked like clockwork. I mean, there was this 30 days of not a lot of sleep, but we did that, worked super productively with their BD and legal team. 30 days later, deals signed, $255 million up front. And what's really cool is that, we're now, the whole team is still here in Oxford, being run pretty independently, but with the kind of firepower of the funding and the expertise of a big company. And I hope, I can't speak on behalf of AbbVie without getting slapped on the wrist now, but I think what's really cool is they kind of recognize that, hey, small biotechs do drug discovery in a really agile, interesting, efficient way. So let's not try and break that model. Let's let this team do really cool stuff in this place in Oxford where there's lots of great science. And so, that's now what we're trying to do. So I think very happy and keen to hear people's thoughts and happy to go into some of the details of any questions. But on the whole, that was kind of how we went from the very beginning right through to the end. Would I do that all again? I think there's lots of bits of that were really fun and really good. There's lots of bits that were less that. Certainly we had at the beginning a very slow ramp, because we had no money and we were the guys who would be found looking in dumpsters for old centrifuges that we could fix to use. And that was super fun. Probably not the most efficient way to get a company going. The whole deal process at the back end, really, I found an email the other day that was exactly 12 months before the deal was signed, which was us reaching out after that first kind of interest, reaching out to a list of people. So kind of at that 12-month process of, I think 2022 kind of didn't, I wasn't really present for, and a lot of our team, it's not just me, but a lot of our team were working 20 hours a day for 9 months straight without time for life or family or all these things. So that was, to be honest, super, super taxing. And there are some things through that, this complex deal structure, because of the kind of company we were with the trade secret and the IP, probably wasn't the right path to go down. So, if we did it again, we hopefully wouldn't do it that way. But on the whole, learned lots of super interesting stuff. And, at the end of the day, when you look back, it's, I think, a genuinely cool result. We'd a company that had taken on in its history less than £9 million in investment, that including government grants, and then got an exit of that kind of magnitude. So at least I think the investors are hopefully quite happy, but also, for us, it was a really great moment for the team. Anyway, I'll be quiet now because I think Megan's going to say a bit about what it was kind of like to be in the team, I guess as the company grew, but also through that process. But thank you.
Hi, thanks, Dave. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm now a Senior Research Associate at DJS Antibodies. I've been here for, just over 5.5 years. So I joined the company back in 2017, so as a research assistant at the time, and also DGS's first employee. That was after I finished my undergrad and master's degrees at Newcastle University. I think I finished my exams and finished working at the university and thought, actually, I'm really keen to join the biotech industry and to sort of start putting my skills to good use. And I really wanted to start making a difference and to get involved with research that I think would actually really make a difference, hopefully by ultimately transforming patients' lives in the future. And that was something that I really, really wanted to get straight into. So as Dave mentioned, before we were based here at this lovely site in the Wood Centre, we were about 30 minutes north at Upper Hayford. I can't say I was expecting, to be honest, when I put the postcode for the company for my interview. When I turned up in the car, I was thinking, am I at the right place? Because it did. We were in an old RAF air base with these big aircraft hangars, and there was all these new housing developments going up. I was thinking, I think the biotech is here, but it's not your sort of typical place that you would imagine. And I think as well, I can't say I'd put that much thought into the fact, or I don't even know if I really knew that I was going to be the first employee of a startup company. But I mean, certainly turning up for the interview and taking the job is definitely one of the best decisions I think I've ever made. And upon meeting Joe and Dave at my interview, they were so enthusiastic. And as soon as I'd finished, I came out to my fiance at the time, and I was just like, I really hope I've done enough, because I was really keen to sort of join their team, and I was really excited at the prospect of just joining a novel biotech and their venture in trying to sort of overcome some new scientific challenges in the GPCR space, and I wanted to get involved in that and be part of that sort of journey. So I think I also get asked quite a lot, sort of, were you worried and nervous about joining a startup? Like, what if things didn't work out? It's sort of not secure. Did you think about joining a larger pharma company? I think not really, to be honest. I didn't really have those kind of worries at all. I think probably the excitement of the research that we were doing, coupled with the fact that Dave and Joe had this sort of unwavering determination to the business. And I think I was just learning so much from Dave and Joe as well, that I was growing so much as a scientist. Whatever the outcome, I feel like it was, just a really great place to be. I think as well, probably I didn't really have much time to think about it, because I guess, as a lot of you probably know, like joining a small company or a startup company, there's a lot of hard work and a lot of long hours involved. So I was kept busy pretty much all the time. So I think throughout my time at DGS, I've mostly been based kind of in the lab, designing and doing experiments practically. But I guess one of the sort of real benefits of being part of a small team is you do get to wear a lot of different hats. And I think I've had a unique opportunity to sort of learn a lot of the ins and outs of developing biologics within a small biotech that probably wouldn't have realised if I'd just joined maybe a larger company and had an assay to do and a bench space. So I think that's been, really, really useful. I think the teamwork has always been kind of at the very heart of DGS, and bringing the right people on board to join the team and grow the team has been really important. So for the first couple of years, there was, I think, sort of up to 5 of us at a time sort of working on the research. And then this grew to a really strong team of 12 people in 2022, which was just at this exit event. And I don't know, I feel like as a company and for our size, we always seem to do extremely well. And I guess that was later recognised by the interest that we got from some of the larger companies later on. So I guess Dave's sort of given some of his thoughts and the decisions that were involved when we had the exit phase coming up. But I thought, well, I can just sort of talk to you about how I guess we felt as the team on the other side as well. So I guess it was in late 2021 when we were all kind of working hard just to produce some new data and also update the slide decks for Dave and Joe to go out on their discussions with investors for trying to secure some more funding and the next part of the sort of DGS future. And then I can't remember exactly how long after that, but we were sort of told about some of the other options on the table that weren't there previously. So the interest that we had from some of the other sort of larger pharma companies, and that could be an option that DGS goes down in the future. I think this was pretty exciting, really, because I mean, as a team, we know that we do great work and the research we do is really important, but for that to be recognised by lots of other people was, really, really nice to hear, and I think generated a lot of excitement and sort of, energy within the company to keep going. And I think, it was all, I guess, quite secretive, I think, with these. So we knew that there was these discussions going on. We had lots of sort of large pharma companies interested, but obviously we weren't really allowed to know all the details and what was happening. Dave and Joe were kept extremely busy, and we knew that there was lots going on. So we were sort of carrying on with normal work as much as possible. I mean, we were sort of brought in and updating data where we could, and we'd also generated sort of big SharePoint sites so that the companies could come in and have a look at all the work that we were doing. But on the whole, trying to get on with normal work, although certainly sort of distractions and lots of questions that everyone had. But we had to sort of wait to be able to get some of the answers for those. I think it was, more in the summertime where the whole team were more heavily involved. So we basically dropped the science and were involved with all the file organisations, compiling spreadsheets and learning how to redact, as Dave mentioned, and that was for a good couple of weeks. So things that as scientists we don't normally do. We're normally in the lab all the time, and we were then sort of in the office just plugging away and trying to get all that to be able to support the company. But I think during that time, there was a great team energy. I mean, it certainly wasn't the most exciting of tasks, but I think everyone really sort of pulled together and helped out sort of when and how they could, which was great. And I think there was this sort of anticipation of sort of exciting opportunities around the corner. So everyone was just, keen to get involved with that. I think, one thing we didn't really know was when it was all going to end. We were doing quite a lot of the work with sort of pulling stuff together. And I know Dave and Joe were trying to say, I think we might be done in a week or 2 weeks, or suggest dates, and we'd get there. And they'd be like, any news? And it's like, maybe next week or maybe the one after that. So I think the timelines were pushed quite a few times. I think we knew we were coming towards the end. I think when Dave did quite a long string of staying up all night on the phone to lawyers, and then he was in the office the next day, spending all day in the office and then being up all night on the phone to lawyers again. So I don't know how he managed to sustain that, but I think we'd all kind of hoped that was coming to a close, because that would be a long time to try and keep that going. So I think generally the atmosphere within the team, there was certainly some uncertainty, but I think generally it was all pretty much of excitement and anticipation. I know Dave and Joe had really highlighted the importance of the team to the success of the company, and also kind of the future of DGS and everyone in the team as well. So I think having that kind of job security post any acquisitional deal that was going to happen definitely calmed any nerves or worry that could have been felt from various team members. So I think that, really helped. As well as David mentioned earlier, the generous decision to enrol all the employees into the options scheme. I think that really made everyone sort of feel personally involved in the acquisition, but also there was that obvious sort of excitement of the reward that was just around the corner, and sort of reward for all the hard work that everyone had put into it, with all the experimental work up till now, but also in the deal and the long hours that was put into it to make it all happen. I think, when the news of the deal was shared by Dave and Joe, I think it was quite shocking. I don't think anyone was expecting how big that would be, and it managed to sort of shock everyone in the team to silence, which, if you know the team, is quite a good effort. And then, once we kind of knew more about the acquisition and that it was going to be AbbVie, we also had some of the senior team members from the company who flew over to the UK as well. And they met with all the members of the team in the office, and they sort of shared their vision of DJS within AbbVie, and also wanted to hear our thoughts on it as well. So I think that was really nice to kind of make everyone feel involved in the acquisition, and also where we stand and where we are involved in all the next steps into the transition into AbbVie. I think the transitioning phase into AbbVie has been quite an exciting and a learning process. Not only because of all the merchandise that we get sent through, sort of mystery suitcases and boxes, and we seem to be inundated with mugs and bottles, but we have access to so many resources now that we just wouldn't have had as a small biotech, as well as experts as well. I mean, I've already spoken to so many people within AbbVie, and it's been so helpful with the projects that we're working on. But there obviously comes with a couple of challenges as well, just phasing into being part of a large company. They have the sort of trying to learn all the acronyms and all the new databases in the system that come with it, and sort of the pace of being within a large company. It's been an interesting process. But I think I've just been really lucky, to be honest, to be part of a unique journey with DJS from the early days and through to the transition of being part of a large AbbVie company. And I think it'd be really exciting to see sort of the next phase really of DGS, and hopefully now we're part of a large company, it's just going to be able to accelerate all the research that we can do. I can only really thank Dave and Joe for taking a chance on me back in 2017 and developing me into the sort of scientist that I am today, because I definitely wouldn't be here without them. So thanks. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions and speak to people after about my experience of it all as well.
Thank you very much. That was so interesting for me, and hopefully everybody else too. We have actually got time for questions now, so I think we've got 10 minutes. So hopefully we've got a few questions in the room. Already hands are going up there. Are you ready?
Yeah. Can I just say, can you speak into the microphone? You won't hear yourself, but it's still on.
Do you mind if we sit? Is that okay?
Go for it. Yeah, else.
Hi, Dave. Yeah, fantastic. When you're growing a small company, you obviously have to take on more people. How did you approach that? Were you looking for people with particular skill sets, or was it more a personality they fit into the team? And how did you manage what must have been a bit of a worry, because a lot was based on know-how, not IP. So that kind of mix must have given you some sleepless nights, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's evolved hugely over time. I mean, at the time that we interviewed Megan, it's very safe to say Joe and I had never hired a person in our lives, let alone tried to manage one or, do anything like that. So it was a huge learning process, and the kind of process we go through now to hire someone has some elements of that and some very different ones. So I think now, if you ask me now, I think Joe would disagree with this a little bit, but my opinion is it's 100% personality. You can teach anyone to do anything, but they have to be enthusiastic and want to be part of the team and be keen to kind of lift their weight. And for the culture we have, there's a certain sort of type of person that likes that, and there are some really fantastic people that will be really fantastic in other roles, but not in the particular culture that we have. So so that's how we do it. But we also now, I think a really important part of what we do is a candidate will come in and meet the other team, and often for lab-based roles they'll go and do a task in the lab with Megan or one of the other scientists, without whoever's going to manage them around, because part of it is hey, how do you work with everyone? There's no hiding within a team that's only 10 to 15 people. You've got to kind of get along and work with everyone. So, we haven't done that perfectly. There are some people that we've had in the team that are no longer in the team, that haven't been a fit, and that's as much on us and not being the right fit as it was on them. But yeah, I think more and more of our time gets spent thinking about exactly this. How do you find the right people? How do you make sure they're enjoying work? The things that keep me up at night now, more than science, is thinking about is the team happy, and are they kind of getting what they want out of it? So yeah, I don't know. That's a
Yeah, just one other quick one related to that, and I'll pass the microphone on. You said a couple of people left the team. Did that? Were they kind of crucial people? Did you worry about, were they going to, take the know-how somewhere else, or is it actually know-how so kind of diffuse that actually it's very difficult to?
Yeah, so I can speak to know-how, and then I'd actually be really interested to hear Megan's point of view on the impact that had on the team. Because, the times that we've had people join and those people have left for various reasons, we're talking about a team of 4 or 5 or 6. So it's a very big impact on the team. But so on the trade secret part, still Joe and I are the only people that know all the details of the trade secret. And so there are members of the team that help with different aspects, and so they'll know this part of the Coke recipe, but they won't know this part. And so you sort of, technically, if everyone got together and had a conference, there's still a few missing pieces, keystones that are not in there, but they could patch a fair bit together. But yeah, basically the kernel of truth is still kept pretty under lock and key. but now with a slightly bigger team, obviously different people interact with that. But yeah, I mean, I'd actually be super interested to hear like your thoughts on when people have left, like what the team kind of thought. Was that all complete shock? Was it, oh my goodness, we're going to revolt, or was it?
No, I mean, certainly, I don't think when people left we were necessarily expecting it as sort of fellow team members, but I mean, we certainly have a lot of trust in yourself and Joe because you're extremely determined and knowledgeable. I guess put a lot of trust in you guys really and the future of the company and what needs to be done, and I guess the rest of us are kind of happy to pull together and carry on really. I think can adjust. I think we end up keeping so busy that you sort of just plough forward and you're always just trying to keep up with the research and the next thing that needs to be done on the list. So.
But I think it's something that, like, I know me, and I'm sure Joe's the same, would never kind of prepare for. You come into this because you're a scientist and you love science, you love doing stuff, and then suddenly you've got to have a conversation with someone that's like, I don't think this is working out. I think, this is going to have to come to an end, which is hard enough as it is. But when you're a team of 5 people, like, you're all kind of family and friends, and you're sort of saying, well, you're the sister or the brother who's now being kind of shunted off the island. It's super. I don't know. We found it so hard because you really like the people and you're really emotionally invested in the people, but for some reason, the kind of work relationship is just not the right fit. And so that's something, I still think lots about. I'm like, well, I can get how some people would take that really personally. This is their profession and they're not in the team anymore. And that makes total sense. But at the same time, you desperately want them not to take it personally, even though that. So I think that's really hard.
Could you pass it back a couple of rows, please?
I missed the part. Is it on?
Yeah.
Right. I missed the part before 2016, but even that you get your first. My question is about the funding or the funding you get to employ people or to grow your team. Have you, between 2016 and 2020, did you purely relying on the Innovate UK grant, if I remember correct? I mean, that was quite difficult, right? Innovate grant is...
Yeah. So that's right. I mean, once upon a time I prepared this graph. I had a chat with like a little entrepreneurial group in town and prepared this graph of our bank account over time. And it's just like this coming down to the wire on like multiple occasions, and actually like looked at and talked about the different dips and what saved us. And so one of them was getting an Innovate UK grant. So the first Innovate UK grant we got was about £750,000. So that kind of doubled the amount of cash we had. The next thing, we then did get another one, which was similar, or about £1 million. So, this is, I guess, over that time, 2016 to 2020, got about that much in grants and had this initial investment. But one of the things that somewhat kind of counterintuitively saved us was COVID. So COVID came along and the government suddenly said, if you're on an Innovate UK grant, we're going to like keep funding you so that you don't go under, because we've sort of decided to fund you. So we got a little bit of kind of a top-up grant through the COVID relief scheme. And that was, on this graph, that was one of these points where we're like firing towards the bottom pretty quickly. It's hard to get in touch with investors because they're all off in their kind of Cayman Islands houses. And so it was really hard to raise financing. But, because of the pandemic, there was a bit of government relief, which kind of trickled us through until we got to December 2020 to raise the round. So yes, we basically survived on government grants. I mean, to remember, we're still 4 people at this stage, so our burn rate is very low. I mean,
well, it's about 300 a year.
Well,
300,000 a year.
Well, I mean, the vast majority of the burn is on experimental stuff, right? Not on personnel. So we could sort of survive for quite a long time if we just shut up shop and stopped working. And so we had to just be very deliberate about, do you want to spend this £100,000 on doing this mouse study or this assay with an external contractor? And it was sort of like, well, yes or no, because we've only got one bet. We've only got one chunk of 100,000 to do this. So like, let's make sure that's the right thing. So the big things that the funding really kind of affected the decisions we made about which work to do. And we weren't really in a position, we knew we could have like hired more people to kind of do that stuff internally, but that would have made it, we would have then been on the train that was going down the hill with no brakes and just hoping the track was being made fast enough in front.
I think you managed to hide that quite well, to be honest. I think as employees, I remember thinking at the time, oh no, we could literally crash at any point. So I think you did a good job to hide any worries that you might have had for the future of the company.
Well, I mean, that's maybe the delusion or the optimism. You sort of...
But I think that's good for us, because we just keep going with what we're focusing for.
But yeah.
Hi. So building on the sort of the questions around the team dynamics and the culture, when you get into some of those big working on the company rather than in the company distinctions, you've got such a big exit possibly on the horizon. Were there any tricks and tips that you would share about how you can manage that confidentiality and still keep the team engaged, still keep the team involved, still keep the team on board, whilst you're doing something which clearly is in another planet in terms of what the need to know basis for the rest of the team?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had the advantage in some respects as, while I was CEO and Joe was CSO, like really from the get-go, it was sort of run together, and, we both totally trust each other and respect each other's opinions. So I think, not that Joe was not involved in the deal, he did stupid amounts, but like the kind of roles, especially at that time, became quite stark in that like he was keeping the ship floating and pointing the right direction, and I was spending all my time doing the other stuff. And so, I mean, as will be obvious, there was a huge team at the end around the deal, but very few of them, or none of them were employees of the company. So we had, a BD consultant who is the best person on the planet and made the whole thing happen. We obviously had legal teams and tax teams and boards and all these people that were helping kind of me on the deal and all of this. And then Joe's stepping in and out as he could with that, but also providing all the updates on the science that was still going on. But I think probably also really keeping to drive the internal science. Because, I mean, I was in the office and at kind of team meetings and maybe being pretty secretive, but hopefully giving at least a few little crumbs about what was happening. So we're sort of physically there, but definitely, as you sort of say, not mentally checked into like, hey, what's happening in the company?
There's an art. I'd be interested in your. So there's an art, and I'd be interested in your experience of making those decisions about how much you can share, because you know a lot of stuff about what's going on outside, but you can give granules, you can give the little nuggets here and there. There must be a conscious decision somewhere about how far you can go and how much you can share to be helpful without giving too much away or raising expectations and keeping the team focused on their day jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is I don't know that I have any secrets, because I don't know that I did that particularly well. Like, I think naturally I kind of like to just get on with things, and so naturally I'm probably a bit more secretive and like just keep things to myself. Just yesterday I was talking to a guy who's running a different company who sort of said they had done that for a number of years and basically like completely burnt out, and were now taking the philosophy of just being like 100% open with their team. Like, this is what's happening. Like, we're in dire straits here. Like, we need to pick up. And, you know, on reflection, for me, that period of doing the deal was really taxing. Like, I think after we signed the deal, I went, you know, we all went to the pub, had a beer, I went home, and I woke up 4 days later. Like, it was like, so is that because of that approach? Is that because I kind of took it on and didn't share it? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the thing that I was, I guess, concerned about, and this is maybe, again, like, so my reflections are, is this right or is this wrong? Were kind of not wanting the team to get worried. And as Megan said, like, there was a few times where it's like, oh, it's a week away, and then a week comes past and it's like, oh, now it's 2 weeks away. And that happened a lot. So I sort of was conscious of not promising, hey, we're about to do this. And then inevitably 3 months later, we were still about to do this. And so wanted to manage expectations, but I could equally see someone saying, like, you know, the best thing to do is just trust your employees and say, like, hey, this is happening. I'm hoping it'll be done in a month, but it might be 6. But yeah, I think on the whole, like, we also had a pretty ambitious, like, because we were so early, we had a lot of science left to do. And we also thought, hey, if we can just get this one next result, maybe they'll bump up the number by a bit. So the team actually through that time was working super hard, not on deal stuff, but on science. So I think there was some advantage in saying, like, guys, the goals are the same. We're still trying to hit these milestones. In the background, we're trying to do this deal, and if that comes through, that's going to be great. But for you guys, other than a few moments where, like, we had to stop shop and do other things, the hope was to give everyone as sort of normal working experience through the time as possible. But yeah, no, I'd be super open to hear that was really, there's a different way to do it that was way better.
Can I just jump in? I think maybe Matt, you've got a question from
Yeah,
online.
just one more because I know we're about there. But the valuation, obviously 255 million, really impressive. How much negotiation was there involved in getting to that number?
I think it's safe to say a large amount. I think I can probably say this because it's not anything overly confidential. But at the time when we first had this interaction, that was like with the pharma R&D who had the VC arm, who said, oh, would you like to do a deal rather than the equity investment? We were sort of thinking, like, oh, you know, yeah, maybe we could get like 10 million up front and then we'll only have to raise 30 million, and that will be way easier than raising 40 million. So it's sort of, we were somewhat surprised, like we obviously believed in what we were doing, but we were somewhat surprised at just how hot the space was and just how unique the molecule that we had produced was. And so, you know, when the first term sheets came in, it was pretty obvious that initial thinking was not right, and it was all in a bigger ballpark. But certainly the process of having multiple parties bidding drastically changed the end goal. And so if we had taken the first knock on the door, it would have been a very different story.
Almost keeping to time, which is great. Well, thank you, David and Megan. That's a really fascinating story, and hope you go on to bigger and better things. I've got lots of questions, but I'll ask you later. That was the first event in this year's series. So the next one is in 2 weeks today, also at 5:30, and we've got two kind of different perspectives that night. So we've got Matthew Walls, who is the CEO of Genencode, which was a startup and listed on AIM in 2021. So he's going to tell us his story. And also we've got Andrew Lures, co-founder and CEO of Habitat Energy, which, according to my information, was acquired by, I think, an investment company called Quinbrook, and I'm sure he'll tell you the details and how much they got for it. So I hope you can all sign up for that and come along to in person. get a chance to hear the stories and also meet a few people. Speaking of which, we're not quite finished yet because there's still some refreshments and food outside. So please come along and enjoy that. And thank you again to our speakers, and thank you for coming along tonight.